Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this presentation. It's my pleasure to be speaking with you in this International Education Week and connecting you to resources to improve your English, whether you are a beginning language student, an intermediate student, or an advanced student. You know you can never stop learning. My name is Jennifer Uhler, and I am the Regional English Language Officer for Russia, based at the U.S. Embassy in Tallinn. And I'm excited to talk to you today about something that I'm passionate about. My office works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I'm thinking about how we can improve the learning and teaching process for English. And when I was thinking about this presentation and how I might reach people during International Education Week, I was thinking about learning in terms of blowing bubbles. I was inspired by walking in a central square recently where I saw someone, much like this picture, spreading bubbles across the square. And it made me think about how when you blow a bubble, you don't just blow one bubble, you blow many, and how important it is to be surrounded by different learning opportunities, and also how following one direction leads you to another. So many ideas bubbled up that I wanted to share with you on this special week to encourage you to continue to learn English independently. And so I'm going to provide a number of different ways that you can connect with resources that are free from the Regional English Language Office and other places for learning, and then make some suggestions about how you might go about taking advantage of these resources. Let's go ahead and start with my first slide. If you can move forward, I want to encourage you to participate. Learning is an active process. We don't learn by sitting and listening or not doing things. And unfortunately, your time in the English language classroom, whether you're a university student, a high school student, or an adult, is never enough to really master a language. So the first piece of advice I want to give to you is to jump in and interact with the language. Specifically, if we go to the next slide, you could participate in an online course. The Regional English Language Office has 5 different courses. They're called MOOCs, massive online open courses through our online professional English network. These courses combine learning English with another topic in a way that integrates content and language at the intermediate level. Each course has about 5 weeks or 5 modules of content. Honestly, you can do them very fast if you're a learner who just is on fire in a shorter amount of time. You can spread them out over 5 weeks, or you can take your time and spend a little bit longer in the modules. I have personally taken 4 of these MOOCs, 4 of the 5, and can vouch for how useful the information is. I want to tell you a little bit about each one to maybe inspire you to check them out. Again, they're free and you can take them anytime. Notice the course dates here are from October 3rd to December 23rd. You can join today, 1 course or 5 courses, or you can wait and we will repeat these courses again next year in 2023. The first course that we have is one I've taken on English and journalism, and it combines the terminology of journalism and different grammatical and vocabulary points with the history of journalism, types of journalism, and the things that journalists might have to think about. You do not have to be a journalist to take this course. In fact, you probably already know these things if you're a journalist, but it's a way to explore English by also being in touch with content that might be interesting to you. The second MOOC, or massive open online course here, is on media literacy. And this is a lot about visual literacy, bias that might be in different kinds of news, voices that are heard or unheard. I've taken this one I think I've taken it twice, most recently 2 years ago. And there's a lot of useful information that might frame how you read, how you watch television, and how you think about sources of information. It's very good. The third MOOC is for people who are interested in developing their CVs and resumes in English thinking about interviewing and developing their career for the future, maybe to apply for a program like those that are offered for free from the US Embassy in Moscow, or maybe just to participate in the workplace. There's a lot of useful information there. In fact, the American Center in Moscow also hosted this massive online open course in a camp earlier this year. The fourth one is the only MOOC I have to admit I have not taken, and it combines STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math with intermediate language skills. And I think it's useful if you are a STEM student or you're interested in STEM topics and want to develop your language skills. The fifth MOOC is on business and entrepreneurship. I took this one a long time ago, but it does talk about developing a business plan, what is a pitch, some of the different language pieces of business and entrepreneurship. All 5 of these MOOCs are fantastic. In fact, if you take one, you may want to take another and another and another, because they're really great content in an online community of practice on our Canva platform. You can find them all at this website, openenglishprograms.org, under MOOCs, and you'll see a lot of information there. Now, an online course, how active can that be? There are chats, there are different ways that you can make this part of your English habits. So my first piece of advice here is to download the courses on your phone. I took the English and Journalism and English and Media Literacy courses from my phone, and I found it a very useful way to pass my time on the bus, on the train, when I was commuting, to do a few exercises, or even sitting on the couch in the evening before I turned on my streaming service. So by doing it on your phone, you're literally carrying an entire course of study in your pocket that you can do when you don't have other things to do. You're waiting in line, for example. The second important thing to remember about participating, or just to know, many people are not successful when they participate online by themselves. So you might think about finding a buddy. In the United States, we give this advice to children, like you need a buddy system, and you hold each other accountable, or you say like, where is Pasha? Where is Dasha? Are they taking this course? And it's a way for you to check in with each other, but also to do something with a group of people so that you feel like you're checking up on each other, but you're also kind of committing to some new habit or new practice. You might also want to organize what is called a MOOC camp, which isn't just with one friend, but many friends. The idea is to bring a group of people together that are all interested in the same topic. I participated in a MOOC camp for business and entrepreneurship, and also one for media literacy. And the idea is you agree, we're all going to enroll at the same time in November, and we're going to meet once a week to have coffee, to talk about the topic, maybe invite some guest speakers, or just to ask questions about the content that we're seeing. I found this to be very useful. It held me accountable, and it's something I've done in other MOOCs with my colleagues at work when we want to learn something about data visualization or something else that's kind of hard. There are many more MOOCs out there. These are just 5 examples. They're the ones that are offered for free from my office, but you will find more online courses on any topic: scuba diving, the history of Greece, on mathematics or some sort of programming, if you're interested in that. You can look for courses in English for free on Canva, which is this platform, on Coursera, on edX, and many other places. So you might find the magic of MOOCs bubbles up and attracts you to continue to participate as a part of how you advance your English. Okay, so my second piece of advice or kind of resource I want to share with you today is in the next slide, and that's about writing. I don't know how you feel about writing. I like the idea of writing, but it is the most difficult skill in every language that I have studied. Probably for you in English too. There's never enough time to practice, and it can seem daunting. The only way you become a better writer is by writing, just like the only way you become a better runner is by running. So I want to provide with you a couple of ideas of how you can independently improve your writing and learn more about academic writing conventions in English. And I want to show you, first of all, on the next slide, our Essay Writing Resource Center. This was a joint effort with Education USA and the Regional English Language Office in South America. We had a specialist who designed a lot of materials. This is not a course. It's more like a reference book where you can jump around and look at Module 1 or Module 9. It includes aspects of learning about academic vocabulary, the writing process, how to get started, how to think about language in certain domains like scientific and technical writing, business and law. And there's also a section on CVs and resumes. All of these modules are free. You can take the material. It's open, it's licensed to be open educational resource. There are model essays, videos, all in English, exercises, quizzes, and a lot more. So this is a good place to start, and you can explore there for free things that are interesting to you around writing. Great. So that's one idea. There are a couple of other of my favorite writing resources. I used to be a writing teacher, so this is something I feel very passionate about. And we can go to the next slide. I'll just offer you some links that you might explore in your free time. So there we go. So some things you can do, you can never do too much writing. So you should make it part of something you do regularly if you want to get better at it. It's not magically going to appear. These are 3 resources that I think are pretty useful. The first one, Hippocampus, is a collection of videos and modules that you can work through sequentially like a course, all for free on hippocampus.org. So check that out. The second resource here is something I've used for almost 30 years as my go-to for writing advice about grammar, vocabulary, citations, plagiarism, and more. The Purdue OWL, like the bird, online writing lab has many resources for international students, non-native speakers of English, as well as American students who are studying at Purdue. They're fantastic. They're updated regularly with lots of different multimedia and infographics and other resources for you to better your writing. So it's a really great place. The third recommendation I have for you, if writing is where you want to improve your English, is Writing Commons. This is a reference book that would probably be about this thick if you printed it all out. It basically is an open source free resource where you can find out all kinds of information about writing, grammar, habits of writers, all kinds of things. So if you only needed a few resources, I would recommend the Essay Writing Resource Center as well as these 3, and making those part of what you do to enhance your English. Okay. So let's talk about another topic. Maybe this one is easier. I want to move to the next slide because what was bubbling up for me as I was thinking about skills was this aspect of listening. And I realized that you might listen to a lot of English in your life. There's the internet, there's YouTube, there's Netflix, there are other streaming services, there's English, I think, in many places internationally. But I don't know about you. When I go online in my foreign languages to find good things to listen to, sometimes it's difficult. I don't know what to look for. I end up with 1,000 different items and it's difficult for me to choose. And so I have 2 things I listen to regularly, and I want to suggest them to you as part of your diet, something you can listen to intentionally for the purposes of learning English. So let's move to the first one. This is a new podcast called My Unsung Hero. And I subscribed to this not long ago. It's very optimistic. I think it provides a positive perspective on humanity. And each episode is only 2 or 3 minutes long. And there's stories from Americans from all different regions, all different professions, all different ages, talking about a time in their life when somebody did something kind that changed the course of their future, how an act of kindness provided them with information or an opportunity or a direction that put them on a better course for their future. These are really, really fantastic if you just want to feel good about humanity for a few moments, but they're also great because they're short enough that you can listen to them multiple times or just include it in your daily or weekly listening habit once in a while. Because unlike other podcasts, it's not like 45 minutes long. And they also include authentic speech, authentic speed, rhythm, and accent. So it will expose you to a lot of different kinds of English in just 2 or 3 minutes. The second podcast that I want to recommend to you is called StoryCorps. So we can move to the next slide. StoryCorps is a podcast I've listened to for a long time. It's been around since 2003, and it is a collection of interviews, not just regular interviews, and not with famous people. They're interviews between two people who have significance for each other with the purpose of telling a story, passing on wisdom, and leaving a legacy for the next generation. This repository of StoryCorps, it's part of National Public Radio, is the largest single collection of human voices ever gathered. You'll find thematic collections around love or trying to think. There's one that just happened around Native and Indigenous Americans telling their stories. Often they're stories between mothers and daughters or fathers and sons or co-workers. They're very powerful. They're also very short. So most of them are also between 3-4 minutes long. You can subscribe to them and you can hear a wide variety of language that's being used in authentic context because it's not made for you. And that I think is precious because you hear idiomatic expressions, incorrect uses of language if you're part of the grammar police, and also speech from different generations of Americans. So I'm only recommending 2 podcasts. There are hundreds and hundreds of them. Both of these are from National Public Radio, which is public supported radio in the United States. It has lots of good content. So if you're looking for more, I want to give you some advice on how to listen. So we can move to the next slide. And this is really what bubbled up to me when I was thinking about podcasts. About 4 years ago, I had the pleasure of learning Brazilian Portuguese. Beautiful language, fantastic. And my teacher suggested some podcasts to me. And I thought, oh, no way, there's no way, this is too hard, it's too long. And I very distinctly remember a moment when I was like bopping down the street, just walking, when I understood. It was clear and it felt so good, so empowering, so insightful to know that I could understand native speakers talking to each other using real language at real speed. So I think these kinds of podcasts that are short, 2 or 3 minutes, can provide opportunities for you to build confidence. So my advice to you is to make listening a habit on your commute, when you're cooking, when you're working out at the gym. You can listen multiple times because these are short. You can listen more than once. Often we don't get all of the information on the first go around. This is why we listen to things multiple times in class. You might get the big picture, but when you listen again, you're going to hear expressions, nuance, different ways of speaking that maybe you want to pick up and bring into your own English language speaking and writing and learning habits. Many podcasts, including these, have a transcript. So if you're listening on a computer, you can follow along and explore accent. Where are the pauses? Is the person's voice going up, down, louder, quiet, to kind of focus on some of those natural inflections that happen with authentic spoken English? And then my last advice for a podcast is something that's new to me. Maybe you've heard of a book group. We've had those for a while. I started a podcast group with 2 old friends during the COVID-19 pandemic. So in 2020, we had fallen out of touch. We suddenly exchanged emails and we're excited to be back in each other's lives. And during one of our Zoom sessions, we found out that we all listen to podcasts, and we listen to different kinds of podcasts. And so we decided that we would give ourselves the homework of listening to a short series of podcasts and then meeting to talk about them. In fact, my unsung hero was one of the podcasts that we listened to and then spoke about together. I find it incredibly motivating to listen with friends and also to have the opportunity to talk about what I've listened to. So you might find a classmate, a friend, a teacher, a family member who's interested in the same thing to join you for those podcasts. All right. Let's go to the next one. I think this is more natural. You can watch to enhance your English. So some ideas that bubble up are things that you have already thought of. I imagine that you watch, maybe not all of you, many of you might watch a lot of YouTube. You might watch a series online or films. You may even watch them in English, so you feel like you're doing this already. There are lots of things you can do to make your watching useful for your English language learning. But I'm going to suggest a specific resource that might stretch you a little bit. So here we go, just one. I'd like to recommend to you this series by the Public Broadcasting Company, which again is a public supported it's television station in the United States that everybody has. And it's usually free. It's always free, actually. Oh, sorry. And I have to, one second. Sorry about that. I had an announcement in my building. I'm back. This particular watching series is from PBS, or Public Broadcasting Service in the United States, and it's called The American Experience. And I'm suggesting it to you because maybe it's not your normal watching habit. So you can see here, I've just taken a screenshot of some random examples that talk about blue jeans. Everybody wears Levi's or blue jeans, but do you know where they came from and why they got a bad name? Maybe not. There's also a series on yellow journalism, so tabloids and sensational news in the United States. Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, the first woman. Hearst, again, who's related to this media giant. Pulitzer. These may be things that you wouldn't normally watch on a Saturday evening with popcorn. However, these are great places to explore aspects of language. I say that because nothing is more than 7 minutes long. They're short, which means you can watch them more than once. And they also will have very different perspectives and maybe something you're just curious about. I think when we watch intentionally, there's a lot that we can use to enhance our English and help our understanding of cross-cultural phenomena, as well as aspects of US culture that may be seen in other things you watch, but if you don't understand them, you can't pick up on the nuances. So it's a way of increasing your cultural literacy. You can watch many, many things in English, I'm aware, but I want to give you some advice. So let's move to the next slide. So some advice from an English language teacher about watching. When you watch with captions and watch without. Pay attention. Are you reading, or are you watching, or are you listening? Probably you're doing a combination of all three, which is okay. That's completely normal. But I would say you'll want to test your ability to understand without seeing the captions. And you may want to watch again to grab pieces of vocabulary that you're missing. This can be a really useful tool. When you're watching to learn, I suggest short clips, because if you're intentional, you will want to maybe slow it down or watch it more than once so that you can grab a pencil and record some of that vocabulary, or put it in your phone if you're a more modern learner. Be sure to diversify your watching diet. If you're only watching science fiction in English, you're going to have some weird vocabulary. And it's better to kind of make sure that you watch things that are maybe a little uncomfortable or a little bit different because you're going to get different accents, different speech patterns. So stretch when you watch for learning purposes. And finally, I'm going to make a suggestion that has been very popular with my students in the past, which is if you have the ability to watch with captions and you're watching a second or a third time, you can do what's called shadowing, where you speak together with the person on the screen, trying to mimic their voice. So if they're speaking quietly, you also speak very quietly. Or if their voice goes way up high, your voice also goes way up high. It's a great way to kind of get comfortable with some of the natural patterns of authentic spoken American English. So those are things you can do with anything you're watching, but you might think about doing with the American experience or even with someone that you admire their speech. Okay, enough watching. We got to turn off our screens and move on to something else. I should remind our audience who are watching today, if you have questions or comments, be sure and leave them in the chat box. I will answer many of them at the end of this presentation. I'd be delighted to know if you are familiar with these resources or if you have suggestions of your own or questions that you would like to ask. All right, let's move on to speaking in the next slide. Much like writing, speaking is a productive skill, and we don't become better speakers if we don't use our voices. And so I wanted to think a little bit about how you could independently provide speaking practice. You know, in fact, research has been done that shows you don't get a lot of speaking practice in a classroom, particularly when there are 30 students in a class or even 15 students in a class. You have to wait your turn. Maybe there's group work, but it's a smaller fraction of class than what we need to become active, confident, successful speakers. So how can you speak if you don't have people to speak with, or you don't have a class that you're in? Here are some ideas, and we can move to the next slide. My suggestion here is, why not form an English club? I have formed many English clubs. I've also participated in many English clubs. It's not hard. You find some friends. You do not need a native speaker. You do not need a teacher, and you do not need an expert speaker. These are generally for fun. There's a free guide book that you can download from americanenglish.state.gov that will give you some ideas of how, who, where, when, how to form an English club. And I think you'll find it really useful, even some topics for exploring when you first get together. In principle, I think it's very important that you make it fun. So find topics that you want to explore together. This is your free time. And use English. Remember that it's not a class, so no one is there to correct each other, to judge each other, or to police someone's grammar. So you need to be friendly in this club. My second thing I'd like to share with you about successful English clubs is that it's often good to experience something together. If you come together with your coffee, oh, what are we going to talk about? I don't know. What do you want to talk about? I don't know. What do you want to talk about? Your conversation is going to be over and people won't come back to the group to speak again. What is more successful, I think, is when you choose something to read, watch, listen to together. You invite a guest speaker to work with you together, or maybe you play a game. You go somewhere. You go to an exhibition, something like that, so that you have something to talk about that your conversation is based on. That makes it much more successful. It also creates relationships in the group so that you know each other better and you feel it coming back. Be sure to structure your time. No one wants to go to a club if it starts half an hour late and it never finishes on time. People are busy and they want to know that it fits in their lives. And so my other advice is, if you're organizing an English club and you say it's going to be at 4 o'clock, that it's really at 4 o'clock, and that people know when it finishes, so that they don't feel like they have to leave to go make dinner for their kids or drive home or something like that. So make sure that the structure is clear to everybody and it's agreed upon so that everyone feels welcome and can enjoy the time. When you have strangers or guests, make them feel welcome. Sounds so simple, right? But it's an opportunity for conversation. And sometimes when groups are formed, they forget to welcome in new people. And then my last piece of advice here is to think about including a social space, whether it's something like Telegram or Signal or Viber or WhatsApp or some other social media, Contacte, for example. Having those groups is really important so that you can share English that you find in your everyday life or things that are connected to your group. Email is also okay, but it creates kind of this continuity and relationship building that can support your club. And you're here, you registered with the American Center in Moscow, which means you already know about our American space in Russia. The American Center in Moscow has many, many clubs that have themes, conversation clubs, clubs for teens, debate clubs, teacher clubs that are all structured so that you can have fun and experience and practice your English. So I would encourage you to join one if you haven't done so already. And if you'd like to do something in person, feel empowered. You can download this book from americanenglish.state.gov and start your own club, maybe with just 2 or 3 friends, to make sure that you have time for speaking English as well as listening and watching, writing. Okay. So we've talked about participating, listening, reading, speaking, writing. We need to talk about reading. Maybe I said reading, but we're going to talk about reading now. So let's move to the next slide. Reading is a way to enrich your vocabulary. I know it's something I never feel like I have enough time to do. There are many resources you can read in English, including some of the sites that I've already mentioned here today. But I'd like to help you cut through some of that so that the good things bubble to the top and you can focus on a couple of places to enhance your English. The first suggestion I have for you is on the next slide. And this is a graded reader. So it's a reader at the intermediate, high intermediate level. We have several of them on the americanenglish.state.gov website for free. You can download the entire book and audio that's professionally recorded by an actor. These are with controlled vocabulary, controlled pacing, but authentic storylines from very famous American authors. I like Edgar Allan Poe. I discovered him when I was in the 4th grade in a poem called Annabel Lee, which is not in this collection. He is a great short story writer, maybe a little bit scary sometimes if you don't know Edgar Allan Poe. This resource is one you can discover, and it's really excellent. Short stories are fantastic for language learning because you don't have to pick up a book and read 500 pages, but you can read a few pages and have a complete beginning, middle, and end. They're rich with vocabulary and great ways to keep your language active or to learn new things. So that's one suggestion I have. And there are more books that are available on americanenglish.state.gov, but I would recommend this one first. The second resource I want to share with you about reading is called the National Poetry Foundation. So we can move to the next slide. The National Poetry Foundation is a nonprofit that connects poems and poets to the public. I love this website. Actually, I don't go to the website very often, I have to be honest. The website's great. When I go there, you can find poems that are in the public domain on lots of different topics, along with audio, often with the author reading them out loud. So I love it for the practice of hearing poetry. What's even better, I like poetry. I suspect that there are Russian English language learners that also love poetry. I love poetry because you can say big, philosophical things with few words. Vocabulary really matters, and it plays with the sound and the language in a way that if you say it out loud is often very beautiful. What's great about the National Poetry Foundation is that you can subscribe to a poem a day. So I'm a busy person. You're a busy person too. And I don't have a lot of time for poetry or for contemplating the universe and philosophizing. But every morning I receive a poem in my email. And when I'm sitting and drinking my coffee and waking up, I read the poem, and it provides me a touch point every day with the creativity, the power, and the resourcefulness of language. I suspect if you're learning a language, some of these poems will be very difficult. That's good. They stretch you. And others will inspire you to continue investigating the author or the topic. This just happens to be a poem that I looked at the other day. So moving to the slide about reading, I want to remind you, if we move to the next slide, that you can subscribe to lots of different content. Could be what I've just mentioned today, the National Poetry Foundation or others, so that you receive snippets or small bits of language that can be part of your diet, one of those bubbles that you have every day. You can read. You can often listen. There's an audio component. You can listen and read so that you can practice multiple skills at the same time. I would encourage you, especially with short stories or poems, to consider reading aloud and recording your voice if you feel comfortable. It's a great way to practice and to focus your attention on habits or points of improvement for yourself and comparing it to the original, or just repeating words and sentences and phrases out loud. And then this last part is so important. When you read to enhance your English, have fun. You should read things you're interested in. If you hate poetry, do not subscribe to the National Poetry Foundation. Look for some information on informatics or science fiction or ballroom dancing or knitting or 3D printing, whatever it is that you're passionate about, cycling, the outdoors. There are all kinds of resources. And I would say reading for fun, something you'd be motivated to read, even in your native language, is going to lead you down a path of success with enhancing your English. Okay, final countdown is coming. I have one more suggestion for you to enhance your English. So let's move to the next slide. And this is my favorite, groove. Maybe you know the term groovy, but this is really like dancing, like particularly when you find your groove in jazz or rock and roll, maybe. I want to encourage you to groove in English. And I have a suggestion for that. Of course, you know, there are songs in English that all of you know, I'm sure, and follow on the radio or online. Those are fine too. But you may want to look a little bit more intensely for music options to enhance your English. So here's some suggestions. Let's move to the next slide. AmericanEnglish.state.gov has a project that brought together independent artists from all over the United States, all different genres, to think about language learning together with music. And so it features a lot of different American music abroad program artists, and it has intentional exercises and supplementary materials for practicing and learning and teaching English, if that's interesting to you. All of it is authentic. It hasn't been changed for you as a learner, but there are materials to help you sort through the vocabulary, the rhyme, the types of language, and the meaning of the songs and who the artists are that is more than just a song. So there's a package for each artist and each song that you can sort through and find videos, readings, and even exercises if you'd like to. So if we move to the next screen, I just took a picture of 12 songs and packages that are on the website for wordplay on AmericanEnglish.state.gov. And you can see here, maybe you don't know about Tony Memel and his band. Maybe you've never heard of Damn Tall Buildings or Derek Nelson or Ben Will. That's okay. These are smaller independent artists in the United States who have a big following, but they have different genres they specialize in. So there's folk, Latinx, jazz, pop, what else? Funk, things like that. I like these songs. I've listened to several of them. And it's just, I think, good intentional music for your language diet. Most of it is pretty easy to parse. Maybe you have this experience. When I was a teenager, we didn't have the internet. And so I would listen to songs on the radio and I'd be boop, boop, boop. And I would have my own ideas of what the language was, and I would get the words completely wrong. So what's nice for these is there's a little bit of space between some of the language, and you can find all the supplementary materials to learn who is the artist, what is the song about, what are some key vocabulary words that might help you understand the song better. Finally, I have some advice for you to groove and learn English in my final slide here. If we move to the next one, you should listen and dance and sing. You could do this by yourself. No one has to know. You can do it in private because these are good ways to learn. It's also excellent for your memory. When you are working with music, you will remember chunks, you'll remember vocabulary in context that you might find useful later and will sound very, very natural and authentic. Do your homework. A song is always more than a song. In the instances I've just described in Wordplay and with the AmericanEnglish.state.gov resources, you can find out more about the artist. What is the song about? Why was it written? These are really interesting and will help improve your cultural literacy and your knowledge about the world. I think that's important, and it's something we really can do through music. You could try, like I did when I was a teenager, to listen and understand the words, maybe take some notes, and then you can check them. Like, do you really understand what the song is about? I think that it's actually very good practice. It also means you've listened to the song more than once. I had cassette tapes and CDs where I would rewind, listen, rewind, listen, rewind, listen, because I was trying to be cool when I was a teenager. This is still excellent language practice. Extend your listening. Listen more than once. Listen to more than one thing. And be open to discovering new places for music. I can tell you that one of my favorite genres for road trips, when I'm driving in a car, originally from the state of Wyoming, so distances are very, very, very far, I like to listen to country western music. It's not my normal habit, but it's what I like to listen to in the car. And what I've discovered there is that country music tells great stories, and it keeps me awake on long journeys. And it's a way that I connect with my family. So don't be afraid to discover something in a genre that maybe isn't your favorite, but might have something to offer you in terms of language learning. I would highly recommend country western music for English language learners because of the story component. There's always something to listen to. Okay, we're nearing the end of my presentation, and I hope I've given you many ideas. If you have comments or questions that you would like to ask, you can put them in the chat box and I will address them soon. And I'm happy to talk to you about any of the ideas I've presented today or respond to any questions you might have about other resources. As I've mentioned before, and we can move to the next slide, I am from the Regional English Language Office for Russia, and we have a lot of resources for teachers and for learners. If you would like to keep in touch with us and know what's coming in terms of exchanges or topics or other types of content about English language learning and teaching, you can join our WhatsApp channel. There's a QR code here you can take a picture of. We'll also put it in the chat box. We post once a day and try to provide content that we think will be interesting to people learning and studying English. And so I encourage you to join. I'm part of a bigger team. So the Regional English Language Office is part of our public diplomacy section at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow. And I want to say to you that there are many opportunities to use your English. So we have a large number of exchanges to go to the United States for short or long-term programs. You should check those out because we're constantly recruiting. We love good candidates, especially people who have learned English and can participate fully in one of those experiences. We also have our Education USA office that has advisors. So if you're interested and exploring options to study in the United States and a short, a long-term undergraduate or graduate program, you can find them online, Education USA Russia, and they would be happy to hear from you. So there are many resources for you, and I'm happy just to share a few with you today from the Regional English Language Office. My final slide has some contact information again. So I hope that I provided you with many beautiful bubbles to contemplate today of ways that you can enhance your English, maybe even just by changing how you watch, listen, read, write, or speak, or participate already, with some resources for independent learning. The only successful learning is learning that you do independently. If you would like to find more resources for learning or teaching English, you can go to our website at americanenglish.state.gov for free courses, information, downloads, lots and lots of stuff. If you'd like to be in touch with me, I would welcome that contact. My email address is relotallinn@state.gov. And you can write with any requests you have specifically for English teaching. But I thank you for your time and attention, and I'm happy now to answer a few questions. I can see that there are some in the chat box here. If you have other questions you'd like to ask that occurred to you or occur to you now, please go ahead and put them in there. I'm delighted to have spent the last 50 minutes talking with you about these great resources. All right, so Nastia, thank you for your comments. I agree with you. It can be so hard to find the right materials, and there's a lot in English, so it's even more overwhelming. And when you're learning a language, sometimes you're not sure. Is this a reliable or an unreliable resource? What kind of information ecosystem am I in? And should I be here? Because it's harder to tell when it's not your native language. So I hope these resources have been useful to you, and some of them are new. So that's fantastic. Thank you for that comment. Mohammed, yeah, I agree. Wordplay is awesome, and it's pretty new. So our office launched this project last year, and it became public in the summer. So many people haven't heard of it yet. If you like it, I would love to know more about it, and don't feel afraid to tell your friends that it's a great resource because it's really free. You can download the songs and watch music videos and find other kinds of resources. Let's see. Thanks for the question, Ksenia, about conversation clubs. Yeah, the clubs I know about are with the American Center in Moscow that would be freely available to people living anywhere in Russia. If you're interested in organizing your own English club, you can download the manual that I mentioned, but that would require you to be kind of like active and looking around your neighborhood. There might be other English clubs around you. I'm not sure. If you're a group of teachers who would be interested in a conversation club, you can email me. And there are a few different clubs that you could join, or you can consider forming your own. We do have virtual educators and virtual specialists from the United States who work with small groups. Again, you have to organize and propose a program. So maybe if you had, I don't know, 20 students or 20 teachers or 20 community members, that's a random number. It could be 15 or 25. It's not, doesn't matter. Who were interested in meeting with someone to have conversation, you could propose a program. It's a competitive program to request. So we don't have like 5,000 virtual educators that can work with people all over Russia. Probably the most available resource for you is the American Center in Moscow. But if you're interested in exploring another option, you can contact me at relotallinn@state.gov. All right. Anna, thanks for the question. Do you think working on your English on your own can be as effective as studying with a teacher? Yes and no. It's the famous "it depends" answer. I'm an English language teacher, but I'm also a foreign language student. So I've studied 8 different foreign languages, different levels of success. And I think you can be successful of learning without a teacher, but you have to be a very rare personality that's highly motivated and spends a lot of time practicing and knows good resources to use and how to use them. Like 99% of us are not like that. We need different kinds of input. So I think a lot of us need structure, whether it's through an online course or an in-person course, through vocabulary and introduction of grammatical features and other types of language that's been well thought through by experts who know what you need to be a complete language learner. That said, I also do not think you can be a successful language user if you only practice in the language classroom. We all need more space to speak, write, listen, watch outside of class. So I find that I need personally, and I've seen this with many of my students, I need a structured class for a bigger ratio of my study time when I'm at the beginning, pre-intermediate, and intermediate stages. And then there's a moment when I become kind of confident and more flexible in my learning approach, when I'm kind of like an advanced or high intermediate student, where I can really find opportunities on my own, and I know how to find them, how to use them, and how to exploit them for my learning. So I think that ratio changes depending on where you are and what you need language for. I have not trained to be a translator or an interpreter. I think if you want to have highly, highly advanced language skills, you do need someone who is pushing you into spaces where you're uncomfortable, even as an advanced learner. So I guess it depends. You can learn without a teacher, but I think you have to have a blend of structured and unstructured opportunities. And I believe that the research supports me in the field of applied linguistics and language teaching on that. Okay. Marina asks, do you know of any services where I can find a buddy? I don't know of any services, but I would suggest you could look around in your neighborhood. The best buddies are people you already know. And what I mean by a buddy is just a friend or someone else who wants to work on their English, someone who has the same goals that you do, so that you can hold each other accountable. My best buddies are usually like a classmate or a coworker or somebody who is in my real life environment that we know each other in a physical space, because those people can knock on my door and say, hey, Jennifer, what do you think about going to the theater or going to a movie? Or have you been taking that massive open online course that we've been talking about? So I would encourage you to go with somebody you already know, because you're more likely to be successful if you can form that friendship and kind of like camaraderie of working together. All right. Irina, can you recommend any resources and give advice for young learners? Yeah, these resources, these online resources, were really focused on adult learners or university students, maybe high school students too. I think there are resources for young learners. If you go on the americanenglish.state.gov website and you search teaching English to young learners, you'll find a bunch of resources. That would be an entirely different presentation than the one I gave today. There are some online resources for reading, also for songs, things like that in English. And my starting place would be to look at americanenglish.state.gov. And also English Teaching Forum has had some articles and issues specifically on resources for teaching English to young learners. So you might start there. Another resource for young learners, if you're a teacher in particular, is the Online Professional English Network. I mentioned that they have massive open online courses for learners. They also have massive open online courses for teachers, and there's an excellent one from George Mason University on teaching English to young learners. So if you're a teacher, that's a good place to look. Even if you're not a teacher, the americanenglish.state.gov website is a good place to focus your energy. Okay, good. Let me see. There are a couple other questions. All right. Lev has a great question about working on pronunciation. How important is it to work on pronunciation to sound like a native speaker? Can I recommend a good place to start? It is important to work on pronunciation. I say this as someone who attempts to speak Russian. If I don't know where the word stress is, you're not going to understand me. And the same thing happens in English. So I don't think it's important to speak like a native speaker. It is very important to be intelligible. And so if you don't pay attention to your pronunciation, no one will understand you. And the point of speaking a language is to communicate and exchange information. And you want to be as effective at that as possible. I think good places for working on pronunciation are by doing a lot of listening, as I've mentioned today, and observing. But it's true, sometimes you don't hear. You don't hear how your voice differs from what you've heard. There are great resources that you can use to record yourself and compare those in independent learning contexts. A teacher can help you focus on specific phonetic features that might be common for Russian speakers or just to you as an individual. I know I have some pronunciation issues that are specific to me as an individual. There's a resource that I like that you can find on the americanenglish.state.gov website that talks about pronunciation using different colors in a vowel chart. Vowels are a secret weapon to having good pronunciation. The vowel chart that is there includes places you can link and hear sounds and also explore them with some exercises. It's called the Color Vowel Chart, and it's on americanenglish.state.gov. That's one place that I would look. There are other resources you can find on American English that focus on pronunciation. I find that reading out loud and recording myself help me be accountable and then believe my teacher about aspects that I need to work on. That's a great question. Okay, I have a question from Vlad about what can you recommend to do if I study English for a long time, but I see no progress? Shall I give up? Well, the reality is it takes a long time to learn a language, a lifetime. You never finish. At the beginning, you can see the difference, right? Because you go from zero to something. And so it can be very satisfying in those first moments when you're learning a language because you can feel like today I understand this, yesterday I did not, and I have new vocabulary. I think the frustrating thing about being an intermediate or even a high intermediate student is you're learning, but you can't see it because those changes are so incremental. So I would say to you, Vlad, don't give up, first of all, because you're making more progress. You just may not be able to identify yourself. If you want to be able to see your progress, I would suggest that you do some recordings or some writings that you can go back to later. So for example, I started learning Russian. I'm not very good, so this is not a test of my skills. I started learning Russian in 2011, and I kept a blog. It's not in the public domain, so none of you can find it. But I kept it when I was studying intensively from the beginning with like short descriptions of what I was thinking about or something I discovered or questions I had. And the great thing about that is it was like taking a picture. And when I felt like I wasn't making progress, I could go back and see that I was using more vocabulary, the length and complexity of my sentences was better. So I think really be patient. It's normal. It's totally normal that you come up and then you kind of plateau at a certain level. And then it's harder and harder to push up. Also, because you can do everything you need to do with the language. And so you have to stretch if you want to, and you have to be uncomfortable to improve your language skills. The hard thing about being kind of a functional high intermediate learner is you can do everything, but you're still missing some pieces. And so having a diet, whether it's listening to a podcast, watching something, writing on a regular basis, can really, really help you progress. So I guess I would say, don't give up. It's normal. I feel your pain. And some of these resources are going to help you improve your language. And you're probably making progress that you can't see, but other people might be able to see. And you could see if you were able to like zoom out from yourself. And so I hope you keep up the learning and that I provided you with some good resources. And thank you to all of you for like the lovely comments. It really was great to have you all here. I hope you found some interesting and useful resources, some bubbles that will inspire you or at least make you aware of how beautiful the process of learning a language is. And I encourage you to be active in the American Center at Moscow's community. They have not only language classes, but they also have movies and speakers, lots of opportunities to listen and practice English in an authentic setting. And if you'd like to know more about the Regional English Language Office, of course, reach out or check out our information. That's all online. So thank you very much for your time and attention. And I look forward to meeting you all again. Keep up the great work.